I'm delighted to be joined by Dean Ashton, one of my former heroes of West Ham United. When I was at school, I had a little bit of swagger when he led us to Millennium Stadium. So, Dean, thank you for joining us. How are you tonight?
I'm very good, thank you. Thanks for asking me along to come onto this. And you make me feel old when you say that.
I'm feeling old today as well. Don't worry about it. Anyway, let's go back to when before you joined West Ham. Actually, summer of 2005, you just got relegated with Norwich City. There was a lot of interest in you. A lot of Premier League clubs linked to you. West Ham were one of them. But you actually signed a new deal with Norwich City. Did West Ham ever come in for you in that summer, or was it all just paper talk?
To be honest, that summer was quite quiet. Obviously, there was a lot of paper talk. But in terms of actual club's interest, my agent sort of said there hadn't been any real concrete approaches. I think there was plenty of rumours about who might come in at the time, but obviously, I then Norwich came in and said about a new contract and staying and obviously trying to help the club get back to the Premier League. So at that point, especially if there isn't any interest, you're certainly not gonna push the situation at that point.
Well, in January, we obviously did sign you. You knew of the interest for quite a while before you signed on the dotted line because you missed the FA Cup game against us with that injury. But you did sign for us for $7 million. What made you pick West Ham? Because you had quite a lot of clubs lining up for you.
I think going to meet Alan Pardew kind of definitely sealed it. Obviously, first of all, West Ham were the first club to stump up the money to actually say yes. It's all right, clubs saying, "Oh, we're interested, and yes, we'll pay this and we'll pay that," but actually, the club have got to come forward at that point, and certainly to break their transfer record, they've got to put a lot of money into me as a player. So you feel sort of certainly very pleased that a club would do that anyway, and then to go and meet Pardew, the most confident man in the world. I sort of went in there. He sort of met. I went to Dartford, a hotel at Dartford, and he did a whole PowerPoint presentation and talked about how I was going to learn from Teddy Sheringham, one of the best strikers England's ever seen, and how I'd be able to link up with the likes of Marlon and Bobby Zamora and all the other players that were in the squad at the time, and it was a real sort of British feel to the squad as well. So he really did sell it to me, to be honest, and that's the kind of person he is. I kind of walked out of there feeling like I was like Pele or something. There was no doubt whatsoever after that I was going to sign.
Don't worry, when I was at school, I thought you were Pele as well. I'll ask you about Pardew in a little bit later on. There's one or two things I'd like to know about Alan Pardew when you played under him. But he said there he told you you'd learn under Teddy Sheringham. Do you think you did when you were at West Ham?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Maybe not his routines in the mornings and after training, because he's just one of those players that just is in great shape all the time, and obviously didn't necessarily do as much pre-training routines. He used to sort of just go in, do his 100 press-ups, do his 100 sit-ups, and leave. And he was still one of the best. He was still one of the best trainers at sort of 39. But honestly, I learned so much from watching him in training and in the games about how I could sort of take things that he was doing and apply that to my game. And I feel like I genuinely did actually take some of what I saw from him into my own game, and I think that's what improved me very quickly as well, and sort of gave me the sort of England recognition.
Well, you hit the ground running at West Ham, and a big part of that was the quarter-final of the FA Cup against Man City. What do you remember about that game, and in particular, that goal? I know you scored 2, but there was a goal, then there was that goal, wasn't there?
Yeah, I think that was probably the goal that I would like to think made certainly West Ham fans think, do you know what, I know we sort of paid a record transfer fee, but there's a glimpse of why he's worth it, and showed not only am I sort of two-footed, but I wouldn't say I'm quick, but I'm certainly quick of thinking anyway. And I mean that game at the time, I was still very much finding my feet and trying to sort of establish myself in the starting 11. There was a lot of pressure from all the players at that point, because everyone was so confident. First game I came in was Arsenal away at Highbury, when Bobby Zamora sent Sol Campbell home at half time. So there was pressure. There was pressure to get into the team. So I think that was one of the main games that I'd like to think certainly cemented my place in the side.
And the FA Cup final came round. How close were you to missing it? Because you didn't train in the week building up to it. And the talk was that you declared yourself fit, basically.
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty close. I mean, obviously, I tweaked my hamstring at West Brom. And I knew that it would be pretty close just from the prognosis, that it would be 3 weeks, and it was 3 weeks till the actual final itself. But I just did everything I could. I went and did a whole oxygen chamber for 6 days on the trot. I just did everything that was possible at the time in terms of rehab. And I think probably one of the best things I did was not to actually run on it until I trained for the first time. So I actually did train on the Tuesday before the final. So I trained Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. So I actually did train, but obviously I had a couple of weeks out because of that injury. So it was pretty touch and go.
What do you remember about the final for the whole day? Because it must be quite special as a footballer getting up on FA Cup final morning, knowing that you're going to be playing a part of it.
Well, it's interesting because we obviously went to the hotel the day before where all our suits were waiting for us, and we sort of double checked that they fitted and all that sort of stuff. We had a good meal, and then we had a team meeting that evening, and Alan Pardew sort of named the team that evening. He named every single player except me or Bobby Zamora. So he left that blank because he said he couldn't decide, because obviously I'd been injured for 2.5 weeks and Bobby had played and done pretty well at the end of the season. I think that might have been the Tottenham game as well that they won on the last day. So I went to bed not knowing whether I was playing. All the other players knew, yeah, I'm either playing, or if I'm not playing, I can mentally prepare. I went to sleep, or didn't sleep particularly well, having not known that I was going to be starting. So I actually didn't know if I was going to start the game until about an hour and a half before kickoff. So I couldn't tell my family. My family didn't know. I was walking around, obviously, the Millennium Stadium, not knowing if I was starting. So it's probably the one thing that I wish Alan Pardew had done differently and handled a little bit differently, but he obviously felt he couldn't make that decision until the last minute. So yeah, it was pretty harsh, obviously, for Bobby to miss out. But obviously, for myself, in a selfish way, I was obviously absolutely delighted to find out I was starting, and then to be part of that is just the best thing I ever experienced as a player. I just think, growing up as a kid, you watch it. You spend all day watching it right from when they leave the hotel, the bus is going through, and it was as special as I could imagine it. And then, once the stadium fills up and you get ready to go out, there's no feeling quite like it. And still, I look back at the photo of when I scored, and it's definitely the photo I've got where you can see there's that just uncontrollable emotion in my face. Scoring goals in the Premier League is amazing, but it's not like scoring a goal in a showpiece final against a team like Liverpool.
You came off when we were 3-2 up. When you were on the bench, obviously the clock's ticking down. Were you ever sitting there thinking, we've won this, we're going to win this?
Yeah, I think I was, because, we were the better team. We looked fitter, we looked stronger. They had a lot of their players going down with cramp. It wasn't as if they were bombarding our goal necessarily with lots of chances. The game had kind of gone into a bit of a lull because they'd got cramp. And yeah, I think there was a few of us on the bench that were sort of getting ready to go on and celebrate. But obviously, yeah, with a player like Gerrard in their team, should have been a little bit wiser not to have got ready. And it was just, I can just picture, we were sat there and watching the game, and then you just heard the Tannoy announcement say, I think there was 4 minutes of added time. Literally, as he stopped talking, the ball dropped to Gerrard, and he fired it in, and it just sort of thought everyone sort of sank on the bench. But I was just gutted. I was gutted that I'd been taken off, to be honest. You just want to be part of the whole game and finish the game. So I was a little bit, as soon as that goal went in, I was then really disappointed that I was going to miss extra time and possibly penalties and be a part of that.
Did anyone blame Scaloni afterwards? Did anyone sort of say, what are you doing clearing the ball into the middle of the pitch and that?
It's probably the one thing that gets mentioned more by West Ham fans than anything else to do with that final.
It's a mystery. It's a mystery.
Scaloni, they can't forgive him. But I don't think we noticed at the time. We certainly didn't notice because obviously he did boot it away and then it got recycled. And the goal itself, it's not like a player was, slipped in down the side of the defender and it got played in, or someone, made a mistake. It was genuinely a piece of genius from Gerrard. And, sometimes you just sort of think, I don't necessarily think, Scaloni might have whacked it downfield or kicked it out again and the goal could have come from something else. So, but it's definitely something West Ham fans won't forget.
No.
He's probably never going to be too welcome back.
He'll be welcome. We'll just ask him why he kicked it in the middle of the park. That summer, Phil, what were you feeling though? You've joined West Ham, you've been there for 6 months, you've got to an FA Cup final, you're looking at the squad, and at the time we all felt there was plenty of talent in there, a good mixture of experience and younger players in there as well. What were you thinking as a player? Were you thinking this squad's got what it takes to go kick on from here, or?
Yeah, I did, especially because I think the FA Cup final took a lot out of the players, or that run anyway. You could tell that our league form dipped towards the end of the season because everyone was concentrating on the FA Cup and getting to the final, and you don't kind of want to get injured at that point, even though I did. But you're very much thinking about that and fighting for your place in that sense. And our league form suffered, but I thought actually before that we were looking really strong, and I felt as if we added a couple more players in the summer, we would have been even stronger and looking forward to a really exciting season. And myself obviously went away, had a quick break, but I was so focused at that point that I got my chance again in the Premier League, and this was my time to sort of prove myself and make a name for myself and do well for the football club, that went away, did as much as I could to be ready for pre-season.
You spoke about Alan Pardew. What was he like as a manager to play under? Because we've heard some stories as West Ham fans about him, and Steve Bacon, the old photographer, said that he liked to be called the king and such like. But what was he like as a manager and a person?
Well, I mean, I think the players called him chocolate at the time when I first got there because he'd eat himself if he could. But I loved him because he was so confident, and he did want to play attacking football, and he made everyone feel like they were a great player. And out on the training pitch, he was very enthusiastic, and it was all about attacking play. It was about forwards. There was never necessarily lots of boring drills for us to do. It was about trying to entertain, and I think certainly as a forward, that's what you want from your manager. I thought he was an excellent man manager as well when he needed to be. Certainly, I mean, obviously I'm going off my own experience. I'm sure there's some players that would say different, and he did buy me as a player, so I think he was always going to treat me pretty well. So from my point of view, I loved my time under Alan Pardew. I would say he's probably the best manager I've worked under in terms of getting the best out of players, the best man manager. Certainly, I worked with.
You're not the first person to say that, actually. I've heard another couple of players say the same thing about Alan Pardew, that he was the best man manager that they worked under as well. Now, that summer, there was England were at the World Cup and you weren't in this squad. Were you disappointed, or did you, because you were still quite young at the time as well, so did you think, I've got enough time on my side? How were you feeling? Because obviously Theo Walcott, who hadn't played in the Premier League, was in this squad ahead of you, if you like.
I genuinely didn't think about it. I never really thought I had a chance, if I'm honest. I only really think the FA Cup final performance, which I would say was the best game I ever played as a player, I think that was probably the only thing that might have given me a sniff of getting in. But at that point, I'd hardly played that many games for the England under-21s. There was still some great players ahead of me in that sense. So it hadn't actually crossed my mind. I mean, people say about it, but I don't really think I was in line. And we have tended to do that in the past. England have gone for somebody that shows obviously great promise, which Theo Walcott did. But the move, I think, to Arsenal, I think just made Sven-Göran Eriksson think that he was a wonder kid and was ready for that, which he obviously wasn't. But that wasn't to say that I was ready.
Do you think if you were a bigger club than West Ham, you would have gone to the World Cup squad that year?
I think people would be naive to think back then. Certainly, I think only Gareth Southgate's changed that mindset. But before that, every other manager, I think, if you played for one of the top sides, then you were way more likely to get into the England squad a lot faster than anybody else. You always felt as if you had to prove it, tenfold with any other club to really get that England recognition. So it was always going to be hard, but obviously not impossible. And but at that point, I was just sort of high on getting to the FA Cup final and having a good season and looking forward to the next season. I never really thought I had a chance of getting in the England squad.
Well, you did get a chance. Straight away in August 2006, you were in the England squad. Then that tackle from Sean Wright-Phillips happened. What was it like? I mean, there's many different questions I can ask you, but I want to sort of know what made you feel. I mean, was there any anger towards Sean?
I think the thing is, I think, especially when I look back on it, I'd had such a good pre-season. I mean, I had trimmed up even more, so I was lean, I was playing well, really well in pre-season, and I see Peter Grant quite a bit here in Norwich at the gym and things like that. And he said a few times how unbelievable I was looking in that pre-season and how he felt I was going to have a really good season, and I felt the same. So initially, it was just that massive disappointment of thinking you've got yourself into the England squad. This is a great opportunity to play for your country, which is something you dream about. And then the day before, in a session that isn't necessarily full throttle, ends up with you breaking your ankle. But that's the sport we play. That is the sport we play. I watch a game every single weekend, and there'll be a tackle that goes in or a few tackles that go in. And I just think you're an inch away, you're a step away from getting an injury. You only have to look at Antonio last night. He looks fit, he looks strong, he's sprinting away. It's not as if anyone's near him and pop, his hamstring goes. It's just that is the way football is. So I've certainly never felt angry at Sean Wright-Phillips, certainly at the time as well, because it just happens. And unfortunately for me, at the time, obviously I knew I'd broke it at the time because you could hear the snap, and it definitely felt like something I'd not had before. And my initial thought was just, that's my chance gone. I'm never going to play for England because this was my real chance to get in. And I was okay, and Gary Lewin sort of got me on the stretcher and took me in. And it was only once I got in the dressing room that I then was in floods of tears just at the thought of missing out on your England chance, and obviously the start of a fresh new season. I think to have the international just before the season, I think was probably a daft idea.
How does that affect you once you've got you've been seen to medically and you're back at home? How does that affect you mentally? I've read and listened to a couple of interviews you've done in the past, so I already know the answer. But for those listening that perhaps haven't heard that, just how bad was it for you?
In football terms, in sporting terms, it's as bad as it can get for you as a player. I think it's very lonely. You might have your family around you, but you still feel very, very lonely. You feel as if and you have those doubts that certainly straight away about, can I ever get back to being a player? Can I actually get back playing? Am I still going to be all right? Am I going to be the same player? You have all these doubts going through your mind, and all you can do is sit on the sofa certainly to start with, for 6 weeks. So yeah, there was definitely a lot of tough days where, you sort of just need to do stuff and I ended up trying to do daft things. My wife would come home and I'd have bought something on the internet. I bought a table tennis table one day, so then I had to play table tennis with her for the next 5 or 10 days just to take my mind off it. And then the next day I think I bought a full-size goal for the garden that we had, which was honestly the smallest garden you've ever seen. And the West Ham groundsman came round and put it in for me, so she could just feed me the ball and I could head it into the garden. So I was doing, you know, your mind goes mad. You do daft stuff. You just try and do something to take your mind off it, and that's what I tried to do. But then, yeah, the painstaking sort of rehab was hard, and it was difficult as well because when I went back into the club, obviously, from the club's point of view, it's all about Saturday. It's about the next Saturday or the next Tuesday. If you're not part of that, you are very, very irrelevant. And even if you've got a bad injury like I had to wait for everyone else to be seen because the physio's time is taking up with the priority of whoever's needed to be fit or get ready for training so that they're fit for the Saturday. I had to wait around, and stuff like that just started to really get to me, that I was just sort of sat around. I felt like I wasn't doing much with my time, and that wasn't necessarily the fault of the physios because they had their priorities to deal with. So I actually ended up going off outside of West Ham and seeing a physio, an ex-West Ham physio, John Green, who had a clinic down the road, and I used to go to him quite a lot to do a lot of my rehab because I felt like I was getting, you know, every minute when I was there, I was doing something. I felt like I was achieving something. Whereas at the club, they're so busy with the priority of the players, which I understood, and you're having to watch the players go out, which is definitely the hardest thing for any injured player. Is people coming in, having a laugh, and then off they go, and you look out the window and they're playing.
This summer transfer window, West Ham made the headlines. We signed Carlos Tevez and Javier Mascherano. What was it like being a West Ham player, seeing us sign those players? I mean, us as fans were wondering what's going on. Was it any different to being a West Ham player?
I just think it was exciting. I think if you're a player, you're excited. Obviously, you're always a bit apprehensive because, you know, especially in Tevez's situation, I was thinking, well, he's certainly come in to you know, be a centre forward and possibly take my place or replace me. So you have them sort of doubts. But at the same time, I was thinking, well, I'm going to be back in 4 months. So then hopefully I'll be able to play with Tevez and Mascherano and these players. So I think it was exciting to think that the club was being this ambitious and being able to sort of bring in the sort of players that they did. It is interesting though, because they were so poor when they first came in. I sort of hobbled out to watch them train a few times, and I think they hadn't probably done much previously where they'd been, and they looked a little bit out of shape. But I mean, you could tell that the talent was obviously there. So I think everyone was pretty excited, to be honest, that the club was making the efforts to bring in some big signings.
So when you first spoke to your uncle, you just said there you thought you'd be playing with Tevez in 4 months. Did you expect to be back by Christmas time?
Oh yeah, definitely, yeah. I mean, I think anyone that probably breaks their leg or their ankle would probably be saying anywhere between 3 and 6 months, probably. 6 months being probably a bit longer than you would maybe expect. Yeah, the prognosis to start with was 3 to 4 months. But obviously, yeah, with the complications that I had with the injury, just ended up being 15 months. So, yeah, at that time, obviously, yeah, I was thinking, right, I need to get myself fit. I want to get myself back in the side, hopefully play with the likes of Tevez, but win my place back. Yeah, I felt as if I was going to get back for Christmas at least and have a good crack at the second half of the season.
Well, that season, although you didn't play a minute of it, West Ham survived on the last day of the season. What went wrong for West Ham that year? Because we went from runners-up in the FA Cup to having to win at Old Trafford to stay in the Premier League.
If I had to put my finger on it, which is difficult just because I was barely there. So the only way I felt like I could cope was certainly not to go to the games and not to be in and around training, which probably sounds a bit sort of callous, but that was the only way I felt like I was going to get through the injury troubles I had, certainly mentally. So I kept myself away quite a lot. So I didn't necessarily see what was going on in the training pitch and if there was some real issues. But I think the one thing that I would put it down to is I think Alan Pardew got on so well with the players. You know, he really did have a good relationship with the players. And then probably when it came down to lack of results and not playing very well, I think that's probably why he then couldn't turn around and have that discipline side. And that's in the end, I think, why they chose Alan Kirbishley to come in, because he did have that discipline side to him.
Well, summer of 2007, you came back, you played a couple of pre-season games, and then you're fine. You know, you played 35 games that season, scored 11 goals. How were you feeling just overall that season? Because, you know, like you said, you were expecting to be off for 4 months. You were off for 15, but you come back and you get a full season under your belt. You hit double figures, and you're loved by West Ham fans.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, look, I was just delighted to be back, to be honest. You know, 15 months is a long time to not be out on the training pitch, and just to get back was great, but it was difficult because I was having to come in before anyone even went out to train. I would already have been outside doing my own pre-warm-up, probably half an hour to 40 minutes before anyone even came out to warm up. And before that, I'd been in the treatment room for an hour, probably getting ready, getting strapped up. It was such a big sort of job just to make sure that I was sort of, the ankle was loose enough to go out and train. And then I obviously had to do all of that after training as well to make sure that it didn't sort of swell up. I was still struggling at that point with the mobility of my ankle. And I think certainly Alan Kirbishley felt that. He felt like I wasn't mobile enough, and he thought I was limping when I was running, which, probably looking back on videos of me playing, it does look like I was limping, but I wasn't. I felt okay, and like you say, I played the whole season. I was fit for the whole of that season without any real issues, because I'd done the work. I'd done so much rehab that I was ready for that season. But I just think Kirbishley didn't trust my mobility, and he liked to play with one centre forward at the time. So the likes of Carlton and Bobby Zamora were getting way more game time because of their mobility and their ability to lead the line, probably better than I could as a lone striker. So it was actually a really frustrating season. Even though I was back and I was fit, I didn't start anywhere near as many games as I wanted to, and it had taken some of my assets away. You look at the Manchester City goal in the quarter-final of the FA Cup. I could not have scored that goal after the injury. I just couldn't, because I couldn't strike the ball the way I used to. I couldn't strike it with the laces anymore. I had to curl every single shot with my left foot. So it took away one of my biggest assets, which was that I was so two-footed. It sort of took that away. And also I was great in the air. And I used to jump off my left leg. So it took away all my spring off my left leg. So I couldn't jump off my favoured leg. I had to jump two-footed. So I ended up having to sort of battle with defenders. So I certainly wasn't the same player. And that mentally sort of takes its toll a little bit. You know, you sort of feel sort of down on yourself a bit that you can't do the things that you were able to before that. But I felt as if I masked it quite well. And I obviously, when I did get a chance, I felt like I performed pretty well. I thought, actually, after the step over against Mexes in pre-season, I thought, I've got to start the first game. But no, Kirbishley didn't fancy me too much that season because of my mobility.
Yeah, I mean, I still remember some of your goals you scored, and listening to you talk there, I was thinking, well, I never noticed you having to sort of counteract your abilities of that. I still remember you doing that Dennis Bergkamp type move. I think it was against Newcastle. You spun the defender on the 18-yarder and just blasted it home into the far corner, and goals like that certainly had the power there. But how, knowing you knew all this throughout the season, were you worried that you wouldn't be the Dean Ashton before your ankle break, or were you confident that would just come within time?
No, I didn't think I'd get it back. I didn't feel as if I'd get the ability to jump the same or shoot the same, because I'd done so much work and it still wasn't there. So I at that point, I assumed it would never really come back. But I was actually getting better and better. And that time before training and after training was getting smaller, and I was feeling a lot better. But at the same time, I was taking quite a lot of anti-inflammatories, which mask it anyway. and I had the odd injection as well at times when it was pretty sore. So even though I was getting better, it was still, it was. I knew I was never going to be the same player, so I had to just adapt and be a slightly different version of myself. And if you look at that season, I barely scored a goal with my left foot. If you were to look at the goals of that season, I think I scored maybe one against Blackburn, which was a tap-in away. But yeah, there wasn't all the good goals like you were saying about Newcastle and I think Aston Villa on the last day, and they're all right-footed. The left foot certainly wasn't the same ever again after that.
Well, after your first full season with West Ham as a compromised Dean Ashton, you got a new contract, you got your England cap. I mean, heading into that season, start 2008, you must have been pretty buzzing because things were going good for you at this point.
They absolutely were. Yeah, I think as well. I'd obviously got that England call at the end of that season. Gone away, got my England cap, which felt just incredible to finally get that, and felt very, very proud of myself that I'd got myself back fit and back into contention at that level, because it is such an elite level to train with. The likes of Gerrard and Lampard, Rio, Beckham, Rooney, all of these sort of players that was pretty special to be a part of that. And again, barely had a holiday that year. I think I just cracked straight on into rehab again, or prehab, or whatever they call it, to keep myself ticking over. And then again, I think that was probably the best pre-season I ever had in terms of, because Bobby Zamora was always the benchmark in terms of the running. If you could be level with Bobby, then you knew you'd had a properly good pre-season. And I was literally just behind him on all the runs. So for me personally, that was a real sort of big sort of boost for me personally in terms of fitness. And again, going into the season, thinking that it can only be a better season than the one before.
Well, first game of the season, you scored against Wigan. You got a couple of goals against Wigan. But just the fourth game of the season, it was to be your last ever professional game of football. What do you remember about that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, great start to that season with the 2 goals. And it was actually in that game, the Wigan game, that I first felt something not quite right. I was just sort of, when I'd go back to defend a corner, and then I would do you sort of just stride back up into your centre forward position. It was weird. Only when I did that sort of run was I feeling something a bit funny in the ankle, but not enough to stop me playing. So I obviously got through the next, I think, 4, 5, 6 games, and got to that West Brom game, in which obviously Alan Kirby left at that point. Gianfranco Zola had been appointed, but Kevin Keane was in charge, started the game, I think about 12 minutes in or something like that. I think I went up for a challenge and cut all the back of my ear open. Obviously rushed down the tunnel, and we had a Greek doctor at the time, and he certainly wasn't the best, and took forever to sort of get ready and get my ear prepped and start stitching it up and that sort of thing. But obviously did, and was ready to then run out with a big bandage on my head. But one of the staff came through and said, it's too late. Kev Keane's already subbed you. So I think probably because he felt under pressure, he didn't want to have 10 men on the pitch for too long, and just decided to make the call to sub me off. So that ended up being very typical of my career, in that my last ever game only lasted 12 or so minutes, and ended up with a big bandage on my head. So it was only then it was actually then Zola's first ever training session on the Monday that I sort of in training, it just I had a bit of floating bone in my ankle, which is why I was feeling a bit weird on them runs on the first few games, and it just sort of locked in on that training session, and that was it.
So what happened then? I mean, I assume you went for scans, and did they just tell you how long were you supposed to be out for initially? Because it was a good, 14, 15 months until you officially retired. So there must have been a lot of trying to get you patched up in rehab, and when did your enthusiasm and your hope disappear?
I think to start with, obviously, once you have a scan and realise there's a there was a floating bit of bone in my ankle. It was obvious, right? You've got to have an op. You've got to have keyhole surgery and get that done. And you're looking at maybe a couple of months just to get back from that. So again, very disappointed, but at the same time, it wasn't like, right, this is desperate. You're never going to get back again. It was a case of, yes, you've got damage from when you originally broke it, where you damage a lot of the cartilage, and there's a little bit of bone touching bone, but nothing too alarming at the time. Had that operation, but it was basically just, I had that operation, came back, did all the rehab, got to the point where I could go out on the grass, first run, straight away, same thing had happened, bit of bone, a chip off, right, back, I think I went back in, had another operation over in Holland with the surgeon that did Van Basten's ankle, again, same sort of thing, came back, same thing happened again, and that was, at that point, it was then obviously pretty clear that no matter what they did, injections, surgeries, it was, it was pretty obvious. I think on one of the times as well, I came back pretty much to getting on the pitch and starting and just did the warm-up with the players just to kind of feel part of it at least. And just in that warm-up, Kieran Dyer turned to me and went, "What is that noise?" And I was just going, "That's just my ankle." It was making a horrible clicking noise at the time, and you just sort of think, if I can't even jog around the pitch with the players, how am I ever going to carry on and be a top sort of Premier League striker? It was obvious at that point that as much as I wanted to try, and I'd have had 10 more operations if I had to, but it was pretty obvious that it was coming to an end.
Yeah, if Kieran Dyer's making a comment about your injuries, I think you're in trouble. I think that's the first sign that there's something not right. If Kieran Dyer's the one that's advising you. But who was the first person to mention the words retirement? Because that must be a very hard thing to tell. You were 26 years old. It must be for a physio or a doctor, your partner, or even just yourself in your own head. It's a very difficult word and topic to bring up to somebody and almost suggest that their career's over before it's even begun.
Yeah, it is. And I think it was when I went over to Holland and to see the surgeon Van Dijk. I think, his bedside manner wasn't quite the same as the guys in England. He didn't have the same affiliation with necessarily a player from England and what that meant. He sort of said pretty bluntly, look, if this operation doesn't work, if you want to be able to walk properly for the rest of your life, you'll have to finish. And that sort of makes you sort of think, well, yeah, I mean, obviously that's a minimum that you'd want as a person, is to be able to walk properly. And I mean, obviously at that point, I couldn't walk properly. I couldn't just get up and walk downstairs. It took me about 20 minutes to even get to the point where I could walk down the stairs. If we went anywhere, with the family, if we went to the zoo or went to the shops or whatever, I had to sit down after about 20 minutes and they'd go off without me, and then they'd come back round and I could then walk a bit more. It was ridiculous for a mid-20s to not be able to do stuff like that. Having young kids that I wanted to play with outside and be a proper dad to, it was then obvious. It's obvious then that you have to make a decision that's right for you as a person for the rest of your life, which at that point was pretty obvious that it was going to have to be pretty soon. But yeah, the surgeon Van Dijk was pretty blunt in his assessment. It's interesting. I've been and done a conference actually about medical people having to say that to players, because players will just carry on. The money's so big, the thrill of playing and not wanting to give it up is so huge. But you need to know as a player what it's going to hold for your future, because there's plenty of players who I see now from when I watched growing up that are really, really struggling with injuries. And luckily for me, I'm not.
Yeah, so earlier when I asked you about your mental state, you said, as a footballer, I want to know about the non-footballer side now. You are a father, you're a husband as well. So away from West Ham United, how did it affect you retiring mentally with your family life and stuff?
I mean, when you're a player, it engulfs your whole life. Everyone around you fits around you and does what you have to do. And obviously, once you finish, that does have to change slightly. And I think it's so difficult for players to because you're so routined, you're so devoted and dedicated to improving every day and being at your best and handling the pressure, to then walk away from that and have quite a quiet house to yourself, wondering what to do with yourself, going to try and do some coaching, but doesn't feel right because you feel like you should be playing. There's a lot of bitterness there that I had towards other players, that why are they having a great career and not me? Why is he getting a move and that should have been me getting the move? Or why is he playing for England? I could have been doing that, which I think is totally natural to feel that way, but it's not a great thing to wake up every day and be feeling a bit bitter and angry and upset and that sort of thing. So it did take me a long time to sort of get through that. And luckily for me, I've got a great wife and kids that were sort of patient. And it probably took me 2 years. I took everything down out of the house, any memorabilia, didn't watch any football, wasn't interested, didn't speak to anyone from the club, players, didn't speak to anyone, just sort of kept myself away and like a hermit in my house. And sort of, you just somehow have to get to the realisation that once you finish as a footballer, there's plenty of other great things to get on with in your life. And actually, when you go back, and the West Ham fans and other football fans that obviously saw me play, the way they treat me, the way they talk about my careers, then you then start to think, actually, I've done something great. I actually managed to get there anyway as a player, which is a lot, millions of people dream of being a professional footballer and never get to do it, play for my country. You end up then just sort of coming out your shell and thinking, yeah, I was really proud actually that I got to that point. And it was of no fault of my own. It just was one of those things that happened.
Yeah, you should be. Up here in lonely Aberdeen, when everyone was running about in a Man U top, I was running about in a white West Ham one with Ashton 9 on the back. So they're probably the only one in Aberdeen with their name and number on the back. But listen, 56 games for West Ham, 19 goals. We spoke about quite a lot of bad moments because in your time at West Ham, it was unfortunately filled with bad moments. But let's finish this interview with some more fun. Okay, what was your favourite moment in a West Ham shirt?
It's actually the overhead kick.
Do you know something? That's my favourite goal you scored. I know it's the Man City one, but it's the one. It's just the way you just push Rio out of the way and come having this, mate. Do you remember Bebo? Do you remember the social website Bebo? Like,
yes, yeah.
On Bebo's social profile, you used to have a video. Yeah, you got to pick your own video. My video was you doing the overhead kick. It was, honest. I swear down, that was my video. It was only for about a week, but it was a week. I had that overhead kick. But yeah, sorry, the overhead kick.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard because obviously we were 3-0 down. We lost the game 4-1, but I think to score an overhead kick at Old Trafford was very, very special. Closely probably followed by the Mark Noble overhead kick, Mark Noble testimonial, which wasn't even as a player necessarily.
Yeah, but how difficult was that? Because I read your interview when you said about how when you went to Mark Noble's testimonial, you had your kids with you for sort of the first time they were going to see you play football, and you wanted to do something that they'd enjoy, and you said a long range shot or something. I mean, you went a little bit better than that. But do you not think, while it was a great moment, did part of that not sort of remind you what they could have been witnessing every week, but they had to witness it in a sort of a one-off charity match?
Yes, of course, yeah. But that was just really nice, to be honest, because obviously, the last time that I was in front of West Ham fans was 12 minutes at West Brom when I got took off and had my ears stitched. So that's not exactly a nice way to sort of say goodbye in a sense. So it was actually so nice. I know it was the day it was for Mark Noble, and rightly so. But for me personally, that was just such a lovely feeling to have the stadium, especially the bowling, absolutely full of West Ham fans, no away fans, all West Ham fans. And to be able to sort of do that in front of them, my family, the kids, they were crying because they'd never heard a stadium full of people singing my name. They'd never heard that, so they didn't understand it and sort of found it quite emotional, which was great. So that was just such a lovely thing for me to sort of have.
Did it feel like a thank you and goodbye from West Ham fans and to West Ham fans from yourself? That one game, I know it's Noble's game,
I think it was nice, and it's like you said, it's that sort of. I think you're right. It's that sort of reminding people that I was a good player and I did have a lot to offer, and there was way more that I could have offered if I'd have carried on playing. And yeah, just sort of show a glimpse. Even though I was 2 stone overweight, I could still do it. So that was it was just nice, and it's actually the one thing that everyone wants to talk about. They don't want to talk about my actual career and FA Cup final. They want to talk about the testimonial goal.
Were you ever close to leaving West Ham? There was obviously, when you were here, there's some interest in you, paper talking that. But I know other West Ham fans felt this way. We always felt you were destined for bigger things in West Ham. When we saw you at the club, we thought, this guy's going to the top. And I will argue with anyone that you would have done if it wasn't for the injuries and that. But were you ever close to leaving at all?
No, not at all. No, I mean, there was never anything that came that was of any serious note. Again, there was plenty of rumours. There was quite a lot of rumours as well that were about when I then signed the new deal, and I still felt as if I had quite a lot to prove as well to the club, who at the time had spent a lot of money on me, and I still felt like I had to repay that, and I hadn't really done enough to warrant going anywhere else. I think that would have been totally the wrong thing at the time, and I was happy with being at West Ham. Obviously, it always helps when they give you a new bumper deal, but I was happy, and I felt like I wanted to still prove to the club and to the supporters that I was worth buying.
And you played with many players at West Ham. Well, there was many players at West Ham while you were there. You didn't always play with them. But who was the best player you played with when you were at West Ham United?
I think if I had to pick one, even though he was a right pain in the arse, was Bellamy. I think he was very different to everybody else in terms of, I think he had an incredible drive and wanted every single training session to be up to his levels. And if it wasn't, then he'd let you know about it. And there was plenty of arguments on the training pitch with Bellas. But then, when I played with him, you actually saw, take away the bravado and the image that people see of him, which is partly true, because like I said, he could be horrible at times to some of the players, but what a talent, like the amount of talent that he had, the goals that he could score, the pace that he had, the intelligence. He was, I would say, probably the best player I played with at West Ham, but Danny Gabardon would come close. I think he was so underrated. I watched him on that first night from the bench at Highbury, and Thierry Henry rarely didn't get the better of people, but Gabs, he couldn't run Gabs. Gabs is one of the fastest players I've ever seen, yet looks one of the slowest when you watch him. But Thierry Henry couldn't get anywhere near him that night. He was absolutely superb and very, very underrated. And again, another player that struggled with his back and struggled with injuries, and really should have gone on and had an even better career.
What's something Craig Bellamy did that was horrible? Not who did it. I don't want to know who he did it to, but just what did Bellamy do? Because everyone's going to be thinking now, what's he done then?
No, it was just in general. He basically, it was like if you got on his nerves or you did something wrong or the standard wasn't right, you were getting it then for that whole session. He would just be at you constantly. Every touch you misplaced, he would be at you. But I loved it because I thought it was getting the best out of everyone, and everyone was on their toes, and the standard should be an elite standard if we wanted to go on and be a better team. I think one of the games he came on as a sub. I think Matt Upson sort of went to play it into him, overhit the pass. Bellas, I think, just literally focused on Matty Upson, absolutely giving dogs abuse. You can probably imagine what he said to him. So then as soon as we came in from the in the game, they basically just, Matty Upson went straight up to him and said, don't you ever sort of act like that in front of the supporters. In, you know, if you want to say something, say it after the game, sort of thing. And they had a good old ding dong that was good to watch. So he wanted his standards. He had a certain way of saying it. I didn't mind it, but it was always going to cause conflict, you know, with certain players, especially when your sort of tensions are heightened when it comes to games. But you could certainly never say that he didn't give absolutely everything whenever he trained and played.
Well, congratulations, you made it to the end of the interview. Last question for you, Dean. Despite all the injuries, did you enjoy your time at West Ham?
I loved it. I absolutely loved it, because I came in to a club that was flying high with confidence, lots of sort of British players, a British manager. It felt like such an awesome place to be. And the one thing that I never had, certainly with Norwich and Crewe, was that I never had a fan base that I'd seen where it's not just about a match day and maybe in and around that sort of city or town itself. It was wherever I went, anywhere in the country or abroad, West Ham fans were there, always wanting to talk about football. I think the fan base massively surprised me, and something that I loved about West Ham and the supporters was, if you played well and did things that they loved, they absolutely adored you. If you were crap, they told you, and I don't mind that. You know, that's how it should be at a football club. If you don't go out there, work hard, entertain, and people have come to pay their money, then they should hammer you, and that's just sort of obviously, you know, not going over the line with that abuse, but that's what I loved about West Ham. It was all about passion for the football club.
Well, Dean, thank you very much. It's been a genuine pleasure speaking to you, and thank you for your honest answers. I think it's fair to say, in my opinion, you were the greatest West Ham striker we've never seen. That's how I would sum up your time here. No, honestly, though, you had everything in my book, and it's just a pity we never got to see more of you. But thank you for giving up your time and coming on tonight. Thank you very much, Dean.
Pleasure.
If you've enjoyed this interview with Dean Ashton, drop a like on the video and subscribe if you're new around here, and we'll be back very, very soon.